quickly introduce the panel. So Dr. Antonella Santuccione Chadha is actually a medical doctor. She said that. She's the co-founder and CEO of the Women's Brain Project. And she has expertise in clinical pathology, neuroscience, and psychiatric disorders. She has worked with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the EU Commissions for Health, Food and Safety, and the World Health Organization, the WHO, as well, and among other things in health and well-being. In 2018, Antonella was nominated in the top 100 women in business in Switzerland, and 2019, one of the most prominent people in the city of Basel. So thank you for joining us. We're really, really excited to have you here, Antonella. We also have Dr. Stephen Chan, our own, from the Bay Area. He's a clinical informatics and clinical assistant professor with the Stanford University School of Medicine. And he's been vice chair of the work group on mental health and the psychiatric apps at the American Psychiatric Association. He's also the co-chair on the Committee on Innovation and member of the Committees of Telepsychiatry and Mental Health Information Technology. He's a really great guy, and really happy to have him here on the panel as well. And Annabel Wilson is the founder and CEO of Living Ashram, a scientifically rooted practical toolkit which brings holistic well-being into corporate organization and individuals. She's also a trustee on the board of Kidscape charity. Is that true? Did I say it right? And a member of the Leadership Council for UNESCO's Voices of the Future Generation, supporting initiatives that enable children to grow up in a world free of harm. So really inspired to have you guys here. Why don't we start all four of us together here and talk about mental well-being in a world of distancing. So I will start just a general question. I mean, like this is just, these times are just very, very unusual for all of us. So before we start talking about deep mental well-being and treating patients and things like that, I want to talk about it from a personal level. How does this whole thing affected each and every one of us? And there's a diverse group here with different kind of expertise and experiences, and I'd love to hear from you guys more the personal aspect of mental well-being in a world of social distancing. So maybe we will start with Antonella here, from Switzerland. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. So I have to first of all say that yes, I'm a medical doctor. And being an Italian medical doctor living in Switzerland has been very challenging for me, because from a mental health perspective, of course, I would have liked to be on the front line with my colleagues in my home country at the time the epidemic exploded in the north of Italy to help. And I've realized that this wasn't easy to be done, mainly because I am a mother of two kids and we live abroad, we live in Switzerland, we don't have anyone helping. So I said, if I leave my family, who's going to take care of my kids if something happened to my husband? So in terms of mental health, one day I have been fully in a despair mode. I literally cried away and I thought, what am I going to do now? And after, really going into my emotions, I decided that the best way was to go into a reactive mode and do anything I could from Switzerland to help my home country and to bring basically my expertise, my network and my skills to the help of the people who needed it most at that time. And the second challenge that I had related to mental health, being a mother of two small kids, was to think that even if I'm locked in, for me, it's fine. I mean, I'm 46, nearly 46. I've experienced the world. I can stay connected via novel technologies, and I can, continue my life in a very privileged fashion, I think, because we are really blessed being where we are even today. But what about children? Small kids, they need social interaction for developing their skills as human. And we know that social skills are the most valuable things for the future to be, given the fact that technology will replace most of the other skills that we used to have in the past. That said, I think that was about me. So these were the main challenge, how to reinvent myself as a doctor and help from remote, and do all I could night and day for the people who need it, which means my home country, and then of course Switzerland, and how to take care of my kids and taking care of their mental health. given the fact that they have no voice. I mean, children are not heard. We are here to talk, they aren't.
So well, let's go to Stephen, to Dr. Chen. I had a great conversation with you about both personal aspects of COVID, but also like your personal experience.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Go ahead.
And tell me if I should change the volume too. My own personal experience, it's been such a whirlwind. In my own personal life, all of the habits that I've accumulated over the past 3 decades, poof. And I haven't been able to go to the gym. I usually take the bus or the train, and a lot of these are not options for me anymore. At my own workplace, we've shifted radically over to virtual care. And we are very fortunate, as Antonella had mentioned too, to be able to still serve our patients and our colleagues through video and telehealth. So very rapidly, we switched over from face-to-face care. I work in addiction psychiatry, and we have been able to shift everything over to video visits or telephone visits. The thing that's been interesting to me personally has been that we've been fighting for a long time for getting telemedicine and telepsychiatry reimbursed and provided for outside of my workplace around the nation. So in my own personal life, I've been fortunate to work with and volunteer for the American Psychiatric Association, the APA, and we are doing things such as advocating for virtual care and ensuring that we can continue some of the changes that we've implemented over the past few months.
Excellent. Tell us a little bit more about that. Like, what are some of these changes?
Sure. So I would say that one of the biggest news stories that has not affected me, but I really learned a lot from is a news article by Robert Caudell in Psychiatric News. It's titled, "We're All Telepsychiatrists Now." Some of the changes have been the HIPAA, doing away with a lot of the HIPAA enforcement. We're able to see folks where they're at, FaceTime, Facebook video, that's Facebook Messenger video, and using technologies that people use every day instead of requiring us to use sort of more cumbersome but more protected, HIPAA-protected technologies. And then another thing that we've been able to do is serve the folks with opiate use disorder. A lot of folks who have been battling addiction and trying to stop use of heroin and overcome this powerful disease, we're able to serve more readily with telephone visits now, which is exciting. So that's one of the things that I feel like we should continue going forward.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And we'll touch more on that going forward. But I want to go to Annabel because she has a little bit of a different approach and a different perspective on these things. And I'd love to hear, your thoughts about it.
In terms of personal challenges or
Yes,
what we've noticed, I'd love to answer that question on both personal as well as what we've noticed, because
absolutely,
we're constantly looking at the latest studies in the psychological, sociological impact of what's been happening. University College of London recently, they've been actually tracking for the last 9 weeks, a group of about 90,000 people across the UK about this exact impact of COVID on their mental health and social issues. So it was fascinating. And we're always talking with every single type of therapist out there, plus functional nutritionist, and we run our own workshops. So it was really interesting, the things that were coming up and contrasting with our own personal. I guess the personal part of this question, or this answer to this question, is shorter. I was actually really quite ill for the first 3 weeks of going even before we went into lockdown officially in London. And that was scary because, like Antonella, I have 2 young children as well, or maybe not so young now. They're 9 and 12. So it raises all kinds of issues of, if something happens to me, what happens to them? And then the grandparents in this country, they're in their 70s, immune compromised. So there's no way they can go to them. And our families are spread out, like most families, modern families these days across the world. So there's of course we went deep into, or at least I went deep into the fear and all the dark places in the beginning. But fortunately, being in the industry that we are in, we were fortunate enough to have all our basics covered, of course, but then also have the resilience tools, the mental health tools to be able to fall back upon and have that network to fall back upon. From a professional level, we were always a digital company. The only thing we did in person were our workshops. So we're very fortunate in that we were already well placed to keep serving our clients, to keep serving. The only thing is, of course, all the businesses were very much occupied with sorting out the immediate needs that they had operationally, staff-wise, health-wise, everything. So everything stopped for a bit on that end, but we had our consumer market. So what I'd love to share a little bit, because so much of this is about community, about what people were going through. And it was really, there was fear, there was anxiety, there was loneliness, there were people going through having difficulties making decisions, sleep quality deteriorating, of course, and all of the rest of and it was really surprising from the UCL study that people were, the effect, not surprising for the people living on their own, but the loneliest, the groups that came across as having the highest level of loneliness were women and adults living with children. And there's, of course, a whole variety of factors behind that. For what came up with for people living alone was that disconnection, that loneliness, and the loss of not just social networks, but physical touch, which those of us who are living with families and a bigger group we kind of take for granted. So that was a big thing that came up as well.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And Stephen, let's talk a little bit about how we deal with some of these things. So, is there a way we deal with stress in this time that is different than what you recommend in normal time, and also particularly because we are talking about virtual health and we are in the context of virtual health here? How can you use technology particularly to deal with stress around this COVID time? So.
Yeah, technology has really helped us, I believe, with this during this pandemic, which we're still in. Still able to connect with people, still able to see people too. And so I think that just the simple virtual visits, simple video visits have been key to helping us continue our conferences, just like this one. A lot of my colleagues in professional societies want to go and meet other people, so we have to substitute it with video visits. Without video visits, I think it would be far more stressful because we'd be stewing in our own negative emotions and sitting alone. In some ways, maybe a telephone or audio could be more intimate. But on the other hand, I think that still having that visual cue is important. A lot of the other things that we do, I mean, I published this in the Science magazine, and some of the other techniques are simply things that we already are doing, even before COVID-19, stress reduction techniques, meditation, relaxation, ensuring that you have good smartphone hygiene and social media hygiene can be helpful even before COVID-19, but they're so much more relevant now. I find myself reading the news over and over and over again and I'm now shifting my Twitter feed so it's a bit more constructive. But really, so I would say much of the techniques have remained the same, but there's a lot more opportunity now, a lot more motivation to use these apps, video visits, and social networks.
Excellent, fantastic. So in that vein, back to you, Antonella. I want to talk about advocacy, right? Like in this time, but again, particularly in the context of the work that you're doing and at the time, right? And what can you tell us a little bit more about these times? Just like Stephen is talking about the patients and how he's thinking about health and well-being. Love to hear about your work in this context.
Absolutely. Actually, you had already the opportunity to listen to Dr. Evelina Biskup from China, and she went on our behalf in China back then on the 10th of February, where we wanted already then as the Women Brain Project to bring our contribution for a scientific and medical aid group that would have liked to reach the region of Wuhan. That wasn't possible. Nevertheless, as you've seen, Evelina stayed in China and she acted as our source of information, scientific information. And what it became obvious back in the days at the beginning of this pandemic is that women would have been, in a way, less confronted with this medical condition than men would have been. In a way, they would have experienced less morbidity and less mortality. So this was, a matter for us to be alerted, because that's what we study at the Women Brain Project. We study how sex and gender might have an impact on diseases, with a specific focus, of course, on mental and brain diseases. And, when the data became available then from the Italian cohort, as I said, this was my home country, we understood, well, something is really going on. It seems that this disease is more aggressive with the male population. In fact, this was already known with the previous epidemics that we have had with the MERS and SARS, but the real reasons behind it were unknown then and are still, in a way, unknown today. Nevertheless, for us, again, it was a matter of transformation. We said, let's make out of this pandemic, with the tragedy that it implies, an opportunity to leverage the learning and transform health for something better. And for us, it was, in a way, the right moment, because we have always been talking about sex and gender differences in diseases. And now the first time the world has seen that what we were preaching already since 4 years was indeed a reality. If you now open the press, if you now open webinars, each second day you have the topic of sex and gender in the COVID pandemic and how to transform the whole healthcare. And, we were the first one, actually, in terms of education around this topic. We did the first webinar already 1 month ago, where we had 300 people from all over the world, scientific community, listening intensively. So for us, the work has become even more intense. We believe that this is a way to go towards precision medicine, because it's not only about sex and gender, it's about age group, it's about risk factors, it's about previous comorbidities. So our organization is trying to change the motive from one size fit all in medicine to precision medicine. So to tailor a solution on the patients that you have in front of you, which goes from prevention strategy towards therapeutic solutions. So this is briefly what has happened with us and with our work, and how the advocacy, which in fact it's based on scientific evidences, because we do science at the Women Brain Project, it becomes even more, obvious and productive in a way. We are really overloaded with lots of things going on at the moment. So let's make it happen.
Wonderful, inspiring. Thank you very much. That was comprehensive and wonderful. And back to you, Annabel, right? So we're going to shifting from the medical side of the equation, right, to the well-being, which is, we're talking about mental well-being. There's a whole range and a nice spectrum there to speak about. And you keep up to date with the latest mental health research and run your own well-being workshops. Just like, we have a lot of sessions running right now around well-being, and I recommend to everybody to join some of them live coming up very, very soon. So in our sessions area. And you regularly collaborate and speak at a broad range of practitioners, from psychiatry and psychotherapy to personal trainers. What are you hearing from practitioners, including just what we're hearing from you about mental health and COVID and the interplay between them?
I covered a little bit about this before, but what COVID has essentially done, all the triggers, all the anxiety, all the fears that we already had and held inside us were suddenly amplified, because all the usual distractions that most of us have in our lives were suddenly taken away, and we were left with ourselves. So it literally, people were just sitting with themselves. So, and with all the scares, in addition to the health, about our families, about our extended families and friends, and for a lot of people, economic issues and greater societal issues as well, they came into play. So they had more time, they're amplified. Things that were there were amplified, and they had more time, we had more time. So there was more time to spiral. Stephen was saying earlier as well about, I guess it comes down to boundaries as well, because your day can just be one endless 24-hour news fest, or you can be on social media for 24 hours. So a lot of us, as we came to navigating our way to a new way of life, a different pace of life, because many of us we're just obsessed with busyness. So this was maybe that was a bit of a long-winded answer to that question, but things that were there just became amplified. So people had two choices. You either go on a 20-hour marathon of watching Netflix nonstop, or you can start to really look at your issues and start doing the work, reaching out. There's a lot of course, self-guided courses, but I highly recommend also working with professionals who are very qualified, where there's a real resonance both with the individual and with that specific, if it's trauma-based, if it's addiction-based, there's a whole range of, so I think the two work very well hand in hand. That's what's really come up. Nothing that's come up during COVID is new from a mental health. And our point of view is very whole human health. So we think everything is interlinked. So it's mental health, physical health, emotional health, and spiritual health all together. And that's the approach that we take.
Thank you. And we always want to put it in the context of virtual health, because like as we all experienced during the pandemic, our life moved into virtual channels. Even this conference, obviously, which is the first of its kind, that brings together people to interact with one another, to learn, experience, and connect, is a brainchild of what's happening right now. Yeah. Right. So and I think that they changed the way we're doing things, right, on health and well-being in day to day, in managing for the good and also for the challenging parts of it. I mean, I think that we're going to discuss both of these things today, but there are new tools that we're discovering. Even I have been doing a virtual health for, more than 15 years now, but I'm discovering new amazing opportunities all the time, and keep getting requests both from my friends, the friends that are just personal friends, but also business friends, that ask me what are the better solutions, right, that can actually help me and help my colleagues, my patients, other people really engage better in their health and well-being. And back to you, Stephen, again, great conversation before that on this, and I know that you have a knack for technology, and you care about that quite a bit on your work in UCSF and some other places that you did great work around technology, particularly around, let's talk about apps, other digital tools, virtual health tools that are out there that can help particularly with mental health and well-being, right? So love to hear some of your recommendations there.
Yeah, I think that, this area has boomed over the past few months. There are a lot of commercial services, but we're also seeing a lot of nonprofits, institutions really stepping up to serve the population in the world. So apps, can span the gamut. Apps can be very much like similar to self-help books. They can be interactive versions of such self-help books with more interactive exercises, prompts, reminders. Some apps can also be dangerous too. There can be fringe books, just like there are fringe books and fringe websites. There was a study that was released with some of these apps had outdated suicide crisis hotlines. So a lot of these apps, there needs to be a smart way to choose these apps. And so some of the work that I've been doing with the American Psychiatric Association, we've got a team, Michelle, Nate, John Torres, and more. We've put together 5 steps towards choosing the right apps, including privacy, safety, and making sure that it's that is actually helpful to you and not taking your data and shipping it off to an advertising firm. But if I had to choose a few of the tools, first off, again, smartphone hygiene, social media hygiene, making sure that notifications are off, do not disturb, you use that as well. And then there's a new app that had come out just a month ago. I work at the Veterans Affairs, but I'm not representing them at this call. But it's free. It's freely available to everybody. The National Center for PTSD released Kovac Coach, which is an app that helps you track your mood and stress and gives you some anxiety reduction techniques. And I looked at it. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous, and it's freely available on Android and iPhone.
Fantastic. That's really good to hear. That I'm inspired always. Like, I as I said before, I get requests literally every day now from new startups and other companies that are coming for me for, either as an investor or as an advisor to help them, create the next generation. But I'm even more excited about like seeing some of these established organizations like the VA jumping into this innovation bandwagon and really quickly. I mean, this is what I'm inspired more than anything else. Like within weeks, right, jumping in and offering solutions that otherwise I think would take sometimes months and sometimes years, you might agree with me, Stephen, and really jump in showing their great expertise and experience, because I think that's like back to we're all in this together. I mean, like, we can't just rely on small companies and innovative people to change everything. We need everybody in this. And I think that I've seen that recently, and I'm inspired by it. And I want to see more large organizations showing, because they have expertise, they have a lot of credibility, right? Like, I mean, how many patients the VA is seeing every single day, and how much depth in research, right? It has, bringing it together. We're going to have American Heart Association later in the day today. Same thing. I mean, I'm really excited to see some of these organizations that used to be very deep but slow, moving very quickly into innovation right now, and collaborating a lot of times with startups, with technologies to actually bring this innovation. So thank you for sharing that, Stephen. I really appreciate that. And I want to go back to Antonella, and again, in the virtual realm of things, you know, what is the potential of virtual solution to address brain and mental health from your prism, right? In specifics, but also, you know, kind of like your more philosophical approach, but almost specifics. If you know some tools or some particular things that people should do or can do, I'd love to hear from you.
I mean, this is one of my preferred questions ever, because I've been working within regulatory for 4.5 years. So I was assessing the benefit and the risk of drugs on behalf of Switzerland. And I was doing it with a specific focus on brain and mental diseases. One of the major issues around clinical development for this type of disease area, it is the fact that we rely very often on scales which are performed by humans and for humans, and which are prone to strong biases. So I think that this transformation that we are all living, it will hopefully help to bring digitalized biomarkers for mental and brain diseases, which will speed up the development of therapeutic solutions, which can be either based on classical drugs development approaches or using novel technologies as well. And I think this is, as you said, a unique moment to see that maybe we can do as humans an effort to move things in faster. And we've seen it also in the way we publish. I mean, it is surprisingly positive to see how fast now data around COVID can reach the scientific community. And it's not about being fast because we want to be fast for the sake of it. It's just to share the knowledge with the scientific community on a real time. And of course, it has to be then validated, it has to be proved, it has to be reproduced somewhere else. We are all aware of this, but at least you get the data available on the spot within the scientific crowd, and you can make learning out of that. I think this is phenomenal, and I hope it stays. And as we said, for psychiatric diseases and brain diseases, this is one of the most unmet need in medicine. You know, in oncology, we have already precision medicine. For mental health and brain health, we are millions of years, I wouldn't say, but at least 20 years far away along the line. So I think that this is an opportunity to really speed up development, engage with novel solutions, bring digital biomarkers, digital health into the game, and maybe move those areas where the strongest human bias is present towards an AI solution, towards a digitalized solution where those things should happen much less, right? I mean, in this regard, I'm happily sharing also that what we do at the Women's Brain Project focus also on digitalized solutions. We should have published in the next couple of weeks, maybe next week even, for instance, a review that we did to address how biases may impact digital solutions for medicine, within medical application. So, you know, this is my hope, and this is where we are working, and we should work all together, not in a silos. You know, also from the drug developer side, it will be ideal to see this common effort to bring solutions to humans, because in the end, that's what we need.
Definitely, this message of that we're all in this together is a big theme for FestiHealth, and it's wonderful to see here. If you look at the audience that we have here, we have people from all over the world, you know, and they're participating from Europe, from even from Africa, from China, of course, from the US, all over the country, and it's South America. And it's just amazing to see how everybody is committed to everybody else's health and well-being. And this new forum that we have here, FestiHealth, that actually enables us to convene, right, and share these ideas and experience them together and meet amazing people, right, enable us to amplify a lot of these ideas, create connections that were not possible before. Conferences, the biggest conferences that I attended before, had tens of thousands of people, and we thought, wow, this is a lot of people that are coming to one place for a week. I mean, we can convene millions of people around this concept and still share the same ideas, still feel great about it, and improve the health and well-being of everybody. So, that's a really great opportunity. But the fact that we're all in this together and collaborating, I think that this is kind of the message that I'm hearing from you, makes a huge difference. And thank you for that. And I want to go for a second. Hi, Sheena. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm good. Can you hear me?
We can hear you very well.
Okay, great.
So I want to. So Sheena is just to introduce Sheena, is the CEO of Stress Point Health, and is being featured in our expo. So if you haven't been, expo is right here on the left. If you haven't visited our expo area, virtual health expo area, I really encourage you to do that because there are wonderful, innovative companies that are presenting there, and you can talk with them, you can get demos, and you can experience what they're doing. So we'll get to you in just a second. We're going into Q&A. But Annabel, last question for you as well. I'd love to hear from you briefly before we jump into Q&A, because we only have 5 minutes left.
Mm-hmm.
You also work on youth initiatives, which I think is I'm very passionate about that as well. Do you think the next generation will view therapy online as the new normal, right? And is it just the new generation, or are we seeing something else? Because I heard from Stephen before, and we'll go to Q&A with Stephen about that, on how people transition right now in his practice. We'll talk about that in a second, Stephen. But Annabel, just quickly from you about that, love to hear what your point of view is.
The short answer is yes, absolutely. I see the end result in adults, which is often the heartbreaking damage that was caused or that can be caused in childhood, and how many years and even decades of therapy and other healing modalities that it can take to process and heal into the healthiest versions of ourselves. So you've already talked about my involvement with the 2 child welfare focused initiatives. There's so many wonderful organizations now that are working very hard to remove any stigma, shame, and secrecy around the need for support that children may have. So be it mental, emotional, or physical. And children are having very open conversations with and access to counselors and therapists from a very young age through schools and other public service organizations. So the next generation, they're already growing up very tech savvy. The remote learning that was put into effect through homeschooling because of COVID only accelerated this. And we now have an entire generation that's very used to learning and communicating and connecting through online video platforms. So absolutely, there's a real openness to asking for and receiving support and a high level of comfort of technology, which online therapy fits very well with. From our point of view, the most important factors of success will be ensuring that the next generation continue, and not just the next generation, but any adult, that any being that needs care, that they feel safe in asking for this support, that there's zero stigma around it, that there's a real culture of openness and collaboration. And then, of course, ensuring an excellent pool of highly qualified, reputable, compassionate therapists who are a good fit for each individual.
Absolutely. Thank you, Annabel. I really appreciate that. And Sheena, thank you for joining us. And I'd love to hear from Stephen a little bit as well. So, but, why don't you share your view on some of the innovation that we're seeing in mental health and well-being from your vantage point?
I think what's been really interesting about COVID is the acceleration we've seen. And just a bit of background, we have an app that uses neuroacoustic feedback principles and sound frequencies to treat stress, anxiety, and PTSD. And I think that up until the COVID pandemic, the sort of focus we've seen generally was this management of symptoms instead of actually treating symptoms. And I think the transition that was happening with digital healthcare previously, and is now even more so, is this sense that the underlying issues are where digital therapeutics can really have an impact, where they might have just been seen as mood tracking and helping to manage how you go forward with these kind of issues. So I think for us, we've seen a massive uptick in people, coming to us, and COVID has been also an example that digital therapeutics have a very important place. When you're stuck at home, you can't do the usual things that you would do. But I totally agree with the sentiments echoed here about regulation and about, making sure that there is some form of a way of identifying the apps that are actually doing good and are not harmful. And I think that that's some way we have to go in the next phase is, with all of these options out there, how do people decipher what's best and what's going to be the best option for them? And we work with psychiatrists, so they recommend our app to their patients where they see it appropriate. And that was sort of our first step, which has proved to be a really good way for users to get the best out of it.
That's excellent. That's fantastic. And back to you, Stephen, because I remember when I talked with you, we had a video conversation before that, and you literally pointed to the seat where your patients used to sit next to you, and showed me that's okay, that's fine, and said, okay, this is where my patients used to be, and this is where my patients are now. So, love to hear from you a little bit about the real transformation that we're experiencing.
A lot of I think that a lot of the equities that we've seen, the disparities, have been bridged, but also widened. So in the past, we would insist on face-to-face visits for some folks, but it would require a 2 to 4 hour round trip on multiple buses and trains to see us in person. And so transportation solved by telehealth. Medicines, needing to pick it up at the pharmacy versus getting it in the mail, particularly for controlled substances, and for things like, in my case, it's buprenorphine treatment. So we've seen a huge transformation where transportation is alleviated. The ability to scheduling is a big one too. We are able to work around people's schedules too, much more freely. And if something comes up, then we give them a phone call and then we can conduct the visit there. On the other hand, we also see people with connection difficulties, difficulties with the equipment, especially if they're in the 60 up range. They're not used to this world of technology, and they may not even have the desire to do that too. And we're seeing this too. I mean, not just this presentation, but other conferences, virtual conferences. So all these different settings and permissions that are required to finally get access to the video and your microphone to go through to the conference or to a video visit. A lot of things can go wrong, but if they align, then it goes well. But the same thing happens with transportation as well. If you miss your bus, if you miss your train, then you can't go to the visit and you have to reschedule. So I don't think that's telehealth's fault or video visits' fault, but those are some of the things that I think about when I prescribe video visits.
Yeah, thank you so much.